My little sister is nothing but a disappointment to this family, my brother said over wine and stuffing. She'll never amount to anything. She'll never be welcome in my home. The room fell silent. No one defended me, not even Mom. I looked down at my plate, swallowed the lump in my throat, and walked out without finishing my dinner. 1 year later, at his wedding rehearsal, his bride-to-be curtsied when she saw me and said, "Your Honor, I didn't know you'd be here. I've always believed the loudest rooms are the ones where you feel the most alone." Ours was Thanksgiving dinner, and the volume was deafening. Laughter, forks clinking, football on TV, and not a single soul who really saw me. I was sitting at the edge of the table, not out of humility, but because I wasn't offered a real seat. Just the wobbly stool from the laundry room. No cushion, no backrest, just enough space to remind me I wasn't quite part of things. I brought dessert, a pumpkin pie I baked myself. I set it gently on the counter, hoping someone might notice. No one did. My mom passed it without a glance and slid store-bought cheesecake into the fridge. No thanks, no smile, just silence. That silence didn't last. After the second round of drinks, my brother stood up to give one of his usual toasts. Dramatic, overconfident, performative. "To family," he said, raising his glass. "To loyalty, to success." Then he glanced at me, smirked, and to letting go of dead weight. The room chuckled. He turned fully toward me and said it, clear, loud, deliberate. "My little sister is nothing but a disappointment to this family. She'll never amount to anything, and she'll never be welcome in my home." I stared at my plate. The turkey on my fork went cold. I was 29 years old, and suddenly 6 again, shrinking into myself, hoping someone would say, "That's not true." No one did. Not Mom, not my aunt, not even my cousins who'd borrowed money from me 2 Christmases ago. My mother cleared her throat. "Let's not start drama, Thomas." That was it. Not a defense, a deflection. As if I was the problem. Again. I didn't cry, I didn't argue, I didn't slam my napkin down like they do in movies. I just stood up, walked over to the counter, picked up the untouched pie, and walked out the door. No one followed me. I sat in my car for 15 minutes. Before I could breathe again, my hands shook as I placed the pie on the passenger seat and stared at the steering wheel. Everything inside me was screaming, grief, rage, humiliation. But above it all was something quieter, sharper. Resolve. I wasn't going to convince them anymore. I wasn't going to keep showing up, hoping one day I'd be enough. They'd already decided who I was, and nothing I said would change it. So I decided in that moment, under a dim streetlight with tears stuck in my throat, I wasn't going to prove them wrong. I was going to disappear, not out of defeat, but out of peace. I stopped answering the why group chats. I blocked my brother's number. I didn't show up for Christmas, or Mother's Day, or Cousin Jake's graduation. I didn't send a reason. I didn't owe one. I got a job at a legal aid clinic downtown. It paid barely enough to cover rent, but I didn't care. I liked the silence. I liked being invisible, because invisibility meant freedom. At night, I studied torts, civil procedure, criminal law. While my family thought I was folding clothes, at some laundromat or waiting tables, I was outlining casebooks and briefing opinions. I didn't post about it. I didn't take selfies in libraries or humble brag about my progress. I just worked. Because if the world wasn't going to hand me respect, I'd build it in secret. One textbook at a time. I didn't vanish. I evolved, quietly. While my brother was posting vacation selfies from Cancun and bragging about his latest promotion at the family's logistics firm, I was scrubbing dishes in a diner by day and studying case law by night. My routine was brutal. 5 a.m. coffee shifts, 10 a.m. lectures, midnight revisions. But unlike their world, all surface and sparkle, mine was real. Mine was earned. At the diner, nobody cared who I was related to. Nobody sneered when I made mistakes. And nobody ever called me a disappointment. They just tipped in small bills and said thank you. That was enough. The day I passed the LSAT, I didn't tell anyone. I just bought a slice of cake and ate it on a park bench, alone, smiling. Law school was tougher than I imagined. Not because of the books, I could handle the work, but because I still carried their voices in my head. She'll never be anything. She's a failure. She'll never be welcome in my home. Every exam I aced felt like a private rebellion. Every footstep I took into that courtroom as a student observer felt like reclaiming ground I was told I didn't deserve. One day, a professor pulled me aside after class. She was a retired judge, tough as nails, barely smiled. But that day she looked me in the eye and said, "You have a mind for this. Not just the law, the weight behind it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." That night, I cried into my textbook. Because it was the first time someone believed in me without conditions. Not, "You're smart," but just, "You're enough." By my final year, I was interning at a nonprofit firm that fought wrongful evictions. My supervisor let me take lead on a case involving an elderly widow whose landlord had forged documents to throw her out. I worked nights, missed meals, slept 3 hours a day. And when we won, when the judge ruled in her favor and called out the landlord by name, I felt something shift, not just in the courtroom, in me. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was a presence. Still, I kept my head down. No announcements, no Facebook posts, no reconnecting with anyone from that old life. They didn't ask, and I wasn't offering. Until one day, something strange happened. I got an email from someone I didn't recognize. Subject: Rehearsal dinner invitation. Thomas and Eliza Body. You are invited to the wedding rehearsal of Thomas Avery and Eliza Summers. Formal attire. RSVP appreciated. No note, no message. No apology. Just a forwarded invite. Probably from some event planner who dumped the entire family email list into one blast. I stared at the screen for a long time. Thomas, my brother, Eliza. That name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. Not right. Away. So I Googled her, and there it was. Eliza Summers, J.D., partner at Grant & Wynn, one of the most prestigious corporate law firms in the state. A few years ago, I'd studied one of her cases in class. A masterful corporate defense, clever, aggressive, airtight. She was respected, feared even, and she was marrying my brother? Life really is strange. I almost deleted the email. Almost. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was defiance. Maybe it was the part of me that still wanted closure. I didn't RSVP. I didn't call. I just circled the date on my calendar. Not for him. Not for her. For me. I arrived exactly 2 minutes late. Not by accident. The rehearsal dinner was held at a private country estate just outside the city, all trimmed hedges, string lights, and wine glasses that probably cost more than my old car. The kind of place my family always said I didn't belong in. I stepped out of the rideshare wearing a simple black dress, no jewelry, no loud colors, just quiet elegance. The kind that makes people curious but unsure why. The event planner at the door gave me a confused look. Name? I told her. She scanned the list, hesitated, then let me in without comment. It took exactly 20 seconds for heads to start turning. My aunt froze mid-sip. My cousin nudged his girlfriend. My mother stiffened, but no one said anything. And then, my brother turned around. His eyes locked onto mine like I was a ghost that had wandered into the wrong memory. His jaw tightened. He muttered something to a friend, then walked straight toward me. "What are you doing here?" he asked, low and sharp. Not even a fake smile. "I was invited," I said simply. "Didn't you want me here?" He scoffed. "This is a private event, okay? You should have at least had the decency to call." I looked around at the catered shrimp towers, the ice sculpture with their initials, the string quartet playing soft jazz near the gazebo. "Seems pretty public to me," I said. He leaned in. "Don't start drama." "I never do," I replied, and walked past him. That was when I saw her, Eliza Summers. She was speaking with one of the groomsmen when her eyes fell on me, and she froze. Not just paused. Froze. The way someone does when they see something completely out of place and incredibly important. She stepped forward slowly. Then, and I swear the whole room turned to watch, she curtsied. Curtsied. "Your Honor," she said, breathless. I didn't know you'd be here," the groomsman next to her blinked. "Wait, Your Honor?" Eliza's voice dropped to a whisper, just loud enough to be heard. She presided over the Simmons arbitration last fall. She's the youngest. Federal appointee in our district. She's brilliant. Silence spread like spilled wine. My brother's face drained of color. My mother gasped. One of the bridesmaids nearly dropped her clutch. I gave Eliza a small smile. "It's nice to see you again." She smiled back, and I saw something rare in her eyes, not just respect, deference. The kind of deference only earned, never asked for. I walked toward the reception area, and suddenly, chairs were being pulled back. Waitstaff moved aside. Conversations shifted. I didn't blend into the background this time. I was the background. I sat at the far end of the table. Eliza made a point to come sit beside me. She kept the conversation warm, but I could feel the carefulness in her tone, like someone who had studied me in a courtroom and wasn't quite sure if she'd passed. My brother sat 2 chairs down, visibly fuming. After appetizers, he leaned over. "So, what, you're a judge now?" I didn't answer right away. I just sipped my water, then said, "Something like that." He rolled his eyes. "Well, good for you, I guess. Some of us were busy actually running a company while you were playing dress up." "Yes," I said, softly. "Some of us were very busy." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't glare. I just let him sit with the weight of his own ignorance, while the bride-to-be kept glancing between us, silently calculating how much she didn't know. Dessert was served. No one touched theirs. Eventually, Eliza leaned over again. "I really didn't expect to see you here, but I'm honored." "I could say the same," I said. "You've done impressive work." She smiled, but her eyes flicked toward Thomas. "I had no idea you were family." "That makes 2 of us," I said. "They haven't acknowledged me in years." A pause. Then she said, almost guiltily, "If I'd known, I'd have reached out. You inspired me back in law school. That arbitration, the way you dismantled opposing counsel. I still talk about it." I nodded. "Thank you, but don't apologize for not knowing. They made sure no one did." Just then, I saw my mother slowly approach from the side of the room. She was clutching her purse like a shield. She smiled, a strained, confused smile. "Why didn't you ever tell us about all this?" I looked at her. "Because no one ever asked." After dinner, people lingered with their drinks, but the air was heavy, the kind of heaviness that settles in after someone at the table flips a card nobody expected. I stepped out to the terrace, letting the cool evening air settle over my shoulders. It smelled like rosemary and money. I could hear murmurs behind me. My name, my title, the word judge echoing through wine glasses and whispers. I didn't bask in it. I just watched the moonlight on the garden pond and let the silence stretch. That's when he came out. Thomas, my brother. He didn't stomp or slam the door. He just walked out slowly like someone who'd lost something and wasn't ready to admit it yet. He stood beside me, hands in his pockets. So, this is what you've been doing all this time? I didn't answer. Why didn't you say anything? Still, I said nothing. He turned, sharper now. You think you're better than us now? Hiding behind a black robe? I looked at him, not with anger, with clarity. I didn't hide. You just stopped looking. He shook his head, pacing. This whole thing at tonight? Was this your revenge? Your little moment to humiliate me? I laughed once under my breath. You think too highly of yourself. Thomas, I said, turning fully toward him, this wasn't a performance. I didn't come here to embarrass you. I came to remember who I am. You're not the narrator of my life anymore. That stopped him. He stared, and for a moment, I saw it. The panic behind the ego. The way his carefully curated world was cracking around the edges. You called me a disgrace. You said I'd never be welcome in your home. But here's the thing. You never had the power to decide where I belong. He didn't reply. So I left him there, in that silence he had weaponized for years, and walked back inside. I crossed the room. Eliza met me halfway. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. For what? For marrying into this without knowing the whole story. I smiled gently. You didn't do anything wrong. She glanced around. Everyone's talking. I think your presence might have changed a few minds. I'm not here to change minds, I said. I'm here to reclaim mine. She paused, then said something I didn't expect. You deserve to be celebrated. I looked at her, really looked at her. I don't need celebration, I said. I need peace. And strangely, I think she understood that. Later, while people danced and posed for photos, my mother sat alone by the fireplace. I walked over, not out of obligation, but curiosity. She looked up at me like she wasn't sure how to start. I didn't know, she said. Any of it. You never asked? She flinched. Not because I said it harshly, but because it was true. You always seemed distant, like you didn't want us involved. Would you have been proud? I asked. If I had told you I wanted to be a judge? Or would you have reminded me of my GPA in high school? Or the time I dropped out of community college for a year to grieve Dad? Her eyes dropped. I didn't need cheerleaders. I needed silence that didn't feel like punishment. There it was, the quiet between us. The weight of years unsaid. I'm sorry, she said finally. We were wrong. I was wrong. I nodded once. Not to forgive, not to forget, just to acknowledge. I made peace without you, I said gently. And I'll be okay whether or not you ever catch up. I left before she could respond. Because some things don't need a ribbon tied around them. They just need to end. Didn't go to the wedding. I never intended to. I woke up that morning, brewed coffee, and listened to the rain tap softly against the windows of my apartment, my own space, my own silence, earned inch by inch. Around noon, I wrote a short card and dropped it in the mail. Eliza, wishing you clarity, courage, and more kindness than I was shown. May your life be yours, not someone else's story to tell. A. No signature, no title, just truth. The next few days were quiet. No follow-up texts, no dramatic voicemails, just stillness. And honestly, it felt like peace. About a week later, I got a single message from my mother. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry we didn't see you. I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because I no longer needed the validation. Her words came too late to carry weight. I had already validated myself. Weeks turned into months. My docket filled with real cases, real lives. Families on the edge of eviction, women fleeing abuse, veterans fighting for benefits they earned long ago, people who didn't care about my family name or my brother's ego. They just needed someone who would listen, someone who could help. And I did. Every single day. Because the truth is, respect doesn't come from titles. It doesn't come from applause. It comes from what you choose to do when nobody believes in you. I don't tell people about that night anymore. Not because I'm ashamed, but because it's not the climax of my story. It's just one chapter, one quiet, powerful, necessary chapter. Eliza sent me a thank you note weeks later, handwritten, careful words, sincere. She said she hoped we'd cross paths again, maybe in a courtroom. I smiled when I read it. Not because I wanted her friendship, but because she'd seen me for who I really was. And that was enough. As for my brother, I haven't heard from him since. And that, too, is enough. Because here's what I've learned. Sometimes the people who call you a disgrace are really just afraid of the mirror you hold up. Sometimes silence is stronger than any shouted comeback. And sometimes poetic justice doesn't look like revenge. It looks like standing still, while they trip over the lies they built around you. If you've ever been underestimated, uninvited, or called a disappointment, know this: your story isn't over. They don't get to define your worth. You do. And maybe, just maybe, one day the world will greet you with a title you earned in silence.